Okay, so today we are going to be estimating quantities. So we're going to be rounding numbers and then writing the results as the product of a single digit and a power of 10. So we're going to be thinking about some scientific notation here as we are going through. So one way to approximate a very large or a very small number is to round the number and then write the result as a product of a single digit and a power of 10. So let's jump right into our first example. It says to round the volume of water on Earth and write the result as a product of a single digit and a power of 10. So it gives us the number down here. We got 332,500,000. So what we're going to do is we want to round to the first place. So this 3 is where we're rounding to. The 3 after it tells us what to do. So remember, if the number after the digit you're trying to round to is 5 or more, you're going to round it up. If it's less than 5, you're going to keep it the same number. So since our second digit is a 3, we're going to keep the first digit a 3. And then we're going to change everything else to zeros after it. Okay, so that's the first thing. We're going to round it to the nearest 100,000, and then we're going to factor out the 3. So factoring out is basically like dividing. So if we divide that number by 3, and you can use your calculator to do that, we would be left with 100 million. Okay, so next up, we're going to think about this number right here, and we're going to count how many zeros there are. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 zeros. So I'm going to keep the 3, and then I'm going to do times 10, and I'm going to put the exponent to be the same number as how many zeros there were. So 3 times 10 to the 8th power. Because if you were to do 10 to the 8th power in your calculator, that's basically saying you would have 8 zeros after it. That's the nice thing about powers of 10. So that is going to be our final answer. 3 times 10 to the power of 8. So that's in scientific notation. And again, it's rounding it, so we're approximating it. Notice it wasn't exactly that number, but we were able to round it. So I want you to go ahead and let's do number 1 together, and then I'm going to have you try number 2 on your own and pause the video for number 2. So again, we're going to look at our 8. This is where we're rounding to. The number after it is going to tell us whether we round the 8 up to a 9 or whether we keep it an 8. Because the 0 is after it, that 0 is less than 5, we're going to keep the 8 the same. And then we're going to add on all of the zeros as placeholders for every single other number. So make sure you've got the same number of digits you started with. Then you're going to write it as 8 times, and then change that 8 to a 1, and then keep all the other numbers a 0. And then our last step is to change that to scientific notation. So count how many zeros we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 zeros. So it would be times 10 to the 9th power. All right, go ahead and pause your video, try number 2. And once you have tried number 2, then unpause the video and check and see how you did. Okay, so we're rounding to where the 9 is at. The 8 afterwards tells us we're going to round that 9 up actually to a 10. And then every number after becomes a 0. So the 8 becomes a 0, the 2 becomes a 0, the 4, the 7, the 8, the 3, the 6, the 2, the 1, and the 8. All of those are going to become zeros. And this time, because the 9 rounded it up to a 10, we actually already have the 1 here. So we can just write it as 10 to some power. We don't have to do the 8 times like we did previously over here. We can just do 10 to some power. So we count how many zeros there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So to be times 10 to the 11th power. All right, so now let's approximate a really small number. So we started with our big numbers. Now we're looking at our small numbers. So it says a blood vessel has a diameter that's this teeny tiny. We want to round the diameter of the blood vessel and then write the results as a product of a single digit and a power of 10. So first thing we're going to do, again, is we are going to round. So this 9 here is where we're rounding to. The 2 afterwards tells us to keep the 9 the same. So it's going to be 0 point. And then you can see we had 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros before our 9. So we're going to put 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros and then our 9. And then we are going to next factor out that number. So it's going to be 9 times, and then we're going to have 0 point, and then we had our 4 zeros, and then we're going to change that to a 1 because we factored out the 9, because we want to make it to be a multiple of 10. So we factored out the 9, which is like dividing by a 9. And then we're going to count how many places we would have to move the decimal over. So if I count here, and I move the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places, then I would get my decimal over here. So it would be 9 times 10 to the 5th power. Okay, so we're wanting to move the decimal over so that we can figure out how many places we had to move it to get the decimal to end up over here at the end. Okay. All right. So when we're doing this, you're always wanting to move the decimal so there is only one number to the left of the decimal. So that's why we moved it over into this spot right here. If you think about it up here, we were moving the decimal. We were counting how many zeros to move the decimal over here to get rid of all of those zeros. All right, so let's try number 3, and then I'll have you try number 4 then on your own. So again, I'm going to rewrite it as 0 point. I'll keep the 3 zeros. And then the 3 actually is going to be rounded up to a 4 this time because the 8 after it is more than 5. So that's going to be rounding it to that first digit that we see. And next we factor out that 4 and we rewrite it, but we're going to have a 1 instead of a 4. All right, so our next step then is to count how many places we'd move it over. We'd move over 1, 2, 3, 4, and sometimes it's helpful to actually draw in that you're moving it over. So I moved it over 4 places, which would make it 4 times 10 to the 4th power. Okay, pause the video, try number 9, and then once you've got number 9, unpause the video and come and check and see how you did. Okay, so you should have finished number 4 by now. So again, I'm going to rewrite, and I've got, let's see, how many zeros? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros. And then if I'm looking at the 7, the 2 after it is less than 5, so I'm going to keep this 7 the same. I will not round it up to an 8. All right, next step is factor out that number. So the 7 will come out, and then we'll do times, and then we'll have 0 point. We'll still have our 5 zeros. And then instead of a 7, now we have a 1 because we factored out that 1. We factored out the 7. We've divided by 7. And then lastly, we're wanting to figure out how far I need to move it over. So I'm going to move it over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it'll be 7 times 10 to the 6th power. Ooh, wait, hold on. Pause just a second. I made a big mistake on these. These should all be negative exponents because they started as really small numbers. That is a huge mistake that I left out. This should be times 10 to the negative 5th. This should be times 10 to the negative 4th. And this is times 10 to the negative 6th. If you started as a really, 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 really small number, a decimal, your exponent's actually going to be a negative number. So go back and check that right now. Make sure you've turned this into a negative 5, a negative 4, and a negative 6 because that was a huge mistake that I left out. Hopefully some of you are looking at that and trying to figure that out and wondering, why is that the same as our really big numbers? If you notice that, bravo, congratulations. That was a big oversight on my part. I forgot to put my negatives on here. If it starts as a really small number, your exponent is going to be a negative exponent, not a positive exponent. So go back and make that change now. So let's actually summarize those. If your number started large, your exponent is positive. If your number started small, your exponent is going to be negative. All right, so hopefully that didn't confuse you too much. I apologize that I left that part off. All right, next up we have approximating a quantity. So it says the distance from Saturn to Neptune is about this many miles. The distance from Mercury to Neptune is about 1.5 times this distance. What is the approximate distance from Mercury to Neptune? So here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to round this original number here. So this 1 is followed by a 9, which means I'm going to round that up. So I'm going to round that to a 2, and then it's going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 zeros after it. Okay. Now it says it is going to be 1.5 times that distance. So the next step we are going to do is factor out that 2. So we're going to make it 2 and then times the 1 with 9 zeros after it, because we're getting rid of that 2. We pulled it out. And then we need to count how many zeros are on there, or how far we'd have to move it over to get to one number only to the left of the decimal. So I will move it over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 places, which will make this 2 times 10 to the 9th power. And my exponent is positive because it started as a really, really big number. So then I just need to multiply that by 1.5. To multiply by 1.5, all I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply 1.5 times 2, which gives me 3. 1.5 times 2 is 3, and then I keep the times 10 to the 9th power. So if I'm trying to figure out which answer it is, it's the one that's 3 times 10 to the 9th power. So that's going to be my B. Okay, questions on that one? All right, I want you to go ahead and try 6, 7, 8, and 9. Pause the video, check and see how you do on them. And once you've got those, then unpause the video, come back and check and see how you did. All right, so you should have finished 6, 7, 8, and 9. Let's check and see how you did now. So if I am rounding to this spot here, the 9 after the 8 tells me to round it up. So that is going to become 9 with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 zeros after it. And then remember to factor out the 9. And then it's going to be 11 zeros. Okay. And then lastly, rewrite that. So it'll be 9 times 10. Let's count how many places we have to move it over. We have to move it over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So it'll be times 10 to the 11th power. Okay. How'd you do? Hopefully you guys got that one. For number 7, we're looking at the 6. The 2 is going to tell us to keep the 6 the same. So I'll come over to the right and do this one. So 6 with a 0 after it, and then I'm going to have 9 more zeros after that. Then remember to factor out the 6 and turn it into a 1. Keep everything else the zeros. And then lastly, we're turning it into times 10 to some power. So again, how many places do I need to move it over? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it'll be 6 times 10 to the 7th power. All right, let's try these last two. So number 8, we're rounding where the 2 is at. The 7 is going to tell us to round it up to a 3. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros, and then we'll have a 3. So 0.000003. All right, remember next step is to factor out that 3. So we'll still have our 5 zeros, but now we'll have it with a 1 instead because we've divided by 3 or factored out that 3. And then lastly, we're counting how far we would have to move it over. So there would be one number to the left of the decimal. So I'm moving it over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places, which means it is going to become 3 times 10 to the, be careful, this is a negative 6 because it started as a really, really small number. Good. All right, and lastly, number 9. So again, I'll come over to the side and do this. So I've got 4 zeros and then a 1 with a 3 after it. The 3 tells me to keep the 1 the same. This one I don't have to factor out a number because it already is a multiple of 10. It's only got a 1 in it. So I just need to count how far over to move it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places will give me one number to the left of the decimal, which means I will have 10 to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 power and make it negative because it started as that really small number. All right, take a second and write your summary. Don't forget about when your exponent should be positive or negative. Don't make the mistake that I did it earlier in the video. Make sure you put a negative anytime your number started as that decimal.